Warning, the Stone Age Gamer includes a lot of bad language. Cover your mother***ing ears.
Good evening and welcome to the Stone Age Gamer Podcast. I am Kris Randazzo and joining me tonight is eye patch wearing pirate Dan Ryan.
Step thump.
Pirate cripplers. We're talking game preservation tonight because it's a hot topic and we didn't do it last week.
That's right, we ran out of time in our short episode.
We sure did. Our short 2-hour-long episode. Is piracy the answer to everything? Don your peg legs, and don't forget to buy your Precious Roy pirate cripplers because the Stone Age Gamer Podcast starts now.
You know, when you hear that distinctive step thump.
Your rum's been drank. Hi, everyone. This is episode 473. It is the week of July 28th, 2023. And Dan, I have had a Twitter interaction this evening that is just blowing my fucking mind.
Holy shit, I am a Twitter-pated. I can't wait. Put it in me. What's up?
I'm curious if there's been a response. Oh, boy. Oh, man. All right. So, I for some reason, I'm still not blocked by Mr. Jules Watson on Twitter.
Really?
And, yeah, I'm amazed that he hasn't blocked me. Because
every time he posts a bunch of people like a little whiny bitch.
Yeah, just about anybody who wants to know what's going on with Hatch Tales. So, this YouTube channel, Resrospect, posted today on Twitter that they interviewed Jules Watson about... today I had the great pleasure of sitting down with the one and only Jules Watson to talk about Dementium for the Nintendo DS. And that will hopefully be posted on YouTube next week if my schedule allows. So look forward to 2 whole hours of talk about one of the pioneers of handheld horror. It was an immense pleasure to cover the history of the game, and I'm so excited to share it with you all. And I said, did you ask him what was up with Hatch Tales, or what he did with all that money he raised to make it?
Nice.
And this is where it gets wild to me, because I figure anybody who's going to sit down with Jules Watson is going to ask about Hatch Tales, because he raised a whole bunch of money to make a game
that he didn't make,
and that he didn't make. Made other games since then, and has completely cut off communications with all the people that he asked for money from.
And, won't say boo about the situation.
Nothing. Won't even acknowledge it. So this Resrospect...
Like it's a different Jules Watson.
Resrospect responded, said, this interview focused on Dementium. You'll want to look here at atui.com/hashtales for Hatchtales info.
No, I won't. I will not want to look there.
Wait, are you being serious right now? You interviewed Jules Watson and you didn't bring up Hatchtales. So I took a screenshot of the website they linked to that said Hatchtales was successfully crowdfunded via Kickstarter on April 5th, 2018 for release on the Nintendo Switch, coming Nebulous 2023.
Yes.
I said the project was fun in 2018. It's been over 5 years, and the last update on the Kickstarter page was in May 2022. To which they responded, the page also says it's slated to release in 2023. I said changing the release date to a Nebulous 2023 earlier this year is the only update there's been on the project since last May. At this point, backers just want to know what happened to the project and where our money went. Did you not know any about any of this before interviewing him? Because there's sure a lot of people wondering what happened to their money. It certainly seems like he used it to make other games instead of what was promised. I'd love clarity, but again, he won't answer questions. And then they just responded, this was not the topic of my interview. I'm sorry if that upsets you. You're still welcome to listen when it gets posted. And if you'd rather not, that's okay too. I hope the game is everything you wish it to be when it comes out. When it comes out. I love the optimism of when it comes out. That's
I do too.
Bless your heart.
It is a launch title for the fucking Amico. It's just... man. Yeah. It's fucked up, man.
I'm fucking fascinated that, first off, this Resrospect channel is tiny. They have 138 subscribers, which I'm not saying, don't do interviews with people that have no subscribers. I'm just curious how this interview came to be. Like,
probably because also, this dude didn't fucking know shit about Hatch Tales.
Which is fascinating to me. If you're going to interview somebody and not do the due diligence of, like, who is this person beside, like, what did you do? But then again, well, I was going to bring up the whole Tommy Tallarico thing on our part, but, like, most of that shit didn't come to pass until way after we interviewed him.
Yeah. That.
Absolutely fascinating.
That's pretty fucking wild, man. Like, especially for that, because it's such a scumbag fucking thing to do.
Like, just tell us.
Just tell people something. What you did with them. You took their money, man. Like, that's not fucking cool. That's not cool. And, like, I know that is part of the Kickstarter thing, and there are, like, warnings of, you know, like, hey, this person might be a piece of shit. So, you know, be careful with your money and all of that stuff. But it's still a fucking really, really shitty thing to do. And you would hope that eventually, that just like, I'm not fucking making it. Kiss my ass. I'm not doing it.
I would respect that far more than what he's doing now, which is he's been all over Twitter for the last, like, couple of weeks or so, just like, yeah, I guess it's been long enough, so I'm just going to pop back up and, you know, point to all my other old works that people loved, and yeah, people have forgotten about Hatch Tales. We're just going to move on with that. Although it's still listed on his website as a thing that's coming soon.
That's
like, okay, if you're going to do, if you're serious about that, at least on the Kickstarter page, like, it's not people just threw money at you and said, make this game. You asked people for money. You said, please, pay me money so I can do this for you. And we said, okay. And then he said, you know what? I'm going to do this instead, but thanks for the money. But he didn't even say thanks for the money. He just did other things instead and ghosted everybody, which is, it's just a scumbag thing to do. And that he's now popping back up and won't even address the situation. It's so infuriating to me because I really liked this dude and his work. I really did. I was a big fan of Atui. I was all for Chicken Wiggle. It's very upsetting.
Yeah, I mean, you are certainly liked him way more. Like, Mutant Muds is pretty good. Zeo Drifter is pretty cool.
I think Zeo Drifter's fucking great. Totes the Goat is fine. It's just Qbert.
But all of these games I thought these were fine. This is fine. Totally fine. But man, to, like, just not even address it, that is really not cool.
Yeah.
Really
big
not
fat
cool.
Bummer. Really big fat bummer.
Yeah.
On the other side of I want to get your opinion on something that was announced earlier today, because I've kind of mixed feelings about it personally. Now,
okay,
I have to make sure I'm saying, you know, straight off the bat, I do not speak for Stone Age Gamer when we're talking about this. Okay, I'm talking about me, Kris, the guy, personally, when we talk about this. So earlier today, I'm trying to find the actual tweet about it because there was a whole video. This morning it was, I just want to make sure I got all the names right. Vamp for a second. Let's go to this morning. PixelFX. Here we go. Okay. So PixelFX this morning had a presentation.
And we missed it.
No, I watched it.
Okay.
I
did not. I don't know what we're talking about. I'm pulling up the website, though.
What was interesting about this is before this morning, I think it was yesterday, July 20th, they tweeted out a GIF from Family Matters of Urkel going into that machine and then coming out as Stefan.
Yeah.
But
Love that shit. Love Stefan.
Right. Family Matters was amazing. So the GIF they added the words to Urkel going in to your current crappy upscaled signal. All right.
Okay.
And then he goes in there and he comes out, the signal they told you not to worry about. Like, okay, I see what you're going for.
See what you're doing.
But what exactly do you mean by your current crappy upscaled signal? Like, are you really just shitting on everybody else who's working on upscalers right now? Because that doesn't seem cool. That doesn't seem cool. But okay. What you doing? All right. So this morning they announced this interesting product called Retro GEM.
Yeah.
Which is it's a pretty neat thing, I have to say. There was just a part of it that the part of the presentation itself I did not care for in the least.
Okay.
It was like the bad version of what Limited Run did last week.
Okay.
Right. So it was like they're trying to go for this old like retro 90s looking thing, but it was kind of a cringy video. It was not. I don't love using that term cringy, but it wasn't funny.
it was. Attempts were made, and I don't think they were successful. Okay.
What I'm curious about is this. All right, so let me load up the YouTube channel. Here we go. All right, so I'm watching the video, and once they finally get to what the product is that it's a chip that you can install in PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, Dreamcast, or N64, with more consoles being worked on in the future. That'll give you a direct HDMI out or something like that, right? It's an internal. It goes up to 1440p, filters and scan lines, minimal lag. It's updatable. It's a whole thing, and it's designed to work for multiple systems, which is a really cool idea.
That is very cool.
So they announced this, and I'm like, all right, that's a pretty neat thing, especially PS2. Like getting proper PS2 HDMI out is not something that's from what I've come to understand, is not something that's easily achievable. Now, this is not my area of expertise. I'm just going on the little base knowledge that I know. The PS2 is kind of the big deal of this thing, because there's existing Dreamcast HDMI mods, there's existing N64 HDMI mods that aren't. They've been around for a little while. They're not terrible, but this one here is working for multiple systems. That's kind of cool. They next move on to, they show some gameplay footage, which was very unfortunate, because they were like, all right, let's watch this thing in action. And then the YouTube compression was so bad. It was like, oh, I see what you're doing, but this looks like trash, man. And it's not your fault. I know it's because you're just streaming on YouTube, and it's compressing the shit out of this burnout footage, but it was really unfortunate. It's fine. I'm sure the signal looks way better than this in motion. They showed a whole bunch of gameplay footage, which was pretty cool. And then they got to, I'm just trying to make sure that I'm giving this to you with accuracy.
Yeah.
So they say that the Retro GEM is going to launch at $99. That's fucking cool, right?
Yeah. It's not a crazy price.
It's not a crazy price at all for a mod like this. That's not bad. Granted, flex cables are sold separately and other things are sold separately. That's cool. But this is the part that I want to get your feelings on. Right after they said that, the words starting price faded in, and they announced Retro GEM Shiny Edition.
Yeah.
Okay, Shiny Edition. So this is a different thing that's going to do different things? No. This is an $80 digital upgrade. So this is a thing that you just pay them for, and it will unlock a feature in this that allows it to do... I'm trying to figure out exactly what that other thing is.
Essentially...
Okay, so the standard
it's
one will go up to
$180.
480p and 720p. This one will go up to the highest resolutions.
Up to 1440.
Right. But this is not a different product. It's the same product that you can then pay more to have be better. How do you feel about this?
That's fucking shitty. That's like...
Okay.
That's super
I feel
duper
the
shitty.
same way. It's paywalling part of its features.
I don't care for that kind of stuff when anybody does it. I don't mind paying for DLC. I mind paying for shit that is on the disc that I have purchased, but you are on, like, but you've locked additional content that you've already made behind a paywall. Like that kind of stuff I have a problem with.
Now I have to admit there's every possibility that I am misunderstanding the way this works. I'm just interpreting what they said. And what I've tried to look into it with different comments and stuff online to see if I could get any clarity, and everything that I've seen is that it's just you pay them this extra money to unlock this thing that this thing can do without paying the money.
Right.
Which, I mean, I don't know. I feel like the retro community is going to crack that real quick. But
yeah, which, you know, I'm fine with that because, like, fuck you for doing shit like that. Like, people are just going to exploit your shit then. If you're going to be a dick about it, and that feels like a dick kind of move. I don't know. I find this kind of stuff interesting too because there are, and we're going to talk about this later, but there are plenty of ways to get these sort of graphical upscaling things for digital games, you know, like, and I know that this is not a digital game. This is upgrading the hardware that you currently own and you want to play on the TV with the control. Like, okay, I get all that. But also, to a certain extent, there's only so much lipstick you can put on this pig. You know what I mean? Like, at some point it gets to, like, other than the convenience factor of plugging it into a more modern TV, at some point the shit is what it is.
And, I mean, there are other things that exist, like retro tanks exist, and they do this, like, externally. And from what I've come to understand, there's a lot more stuff on the way that might render some of this stuff moot. But I guess
like you're just not. Why would you ever put a PS1 game in 1440? What are you hoping to see? That, like, do you want to count the fucking jagged edges? Like, I'm not entirely sure. Because then if you're talking about, like, smoothing...
Well, the point there is clarity, right? Because when you're putting these older platforms on your modern TV, but not in a high enough resolution, they look worse than they did on a CRT. So I think the ultimate goal is, how do we get it? Because, you know, CRTs, they function differently, and these games were designed around that kind of stuff. So the goal is to make it not look terrible on your new TV. Now, what you're saying about, like, the whole, how much lipstick are you going to put on this pig? I totally get you on the PS1 department, and especially the N64 department. Good lord! But
like, there's only so
PS2
much
games,
you can do.
PS2 games, I can understand wanting to give as much clarity as you can to that. You're still going to have images that look kind of jaggy, but, like, at the end of the day, PS2 games, there's a lot. They can look really nice when you clean them up, and you want them to not look terribly out of place on your new TV. You want them to look like the new TV. We're talking HD TVs like they're new. They're new compared to PS2. Your brand new fucking flat screen plasma high def television. Woo! I know. It's I do see your point, but I don't know. Just having played around with them myself, you do want something that's not going to make the games look bad on the new TV, and I think that's where the problem comes in. Is that there's a lot of options that exist that that make the games look and feel considerably worse than they did on their original intended displays. Like, and especially ones that they'll look nice, but they'll introduce lag. Like, okay, now I've made it prettier, but now it doesn't play well. So the goal here is to take these systems, especially these later ones, right, like PlayStation 2 and original Xbox. The goal is to take them and make them look and play as well as they did on a CRT on a modern flat screen TV. And that's a considerable challenge because most people don't still have CRTs. And if they want to go back and play their PlayStation 2s, what options are there that don't introduce other problems, right? So we're now looking at new ways to get around that, to skirt those issues. It's all it's all a pretty wild thing. It's remains somewhat foreign to me because I still have my CRT, right? If I'm playing a PlayStation 2 game, I'm either going to play it on my CRT or I'm going to put it on my PS3. But even putting them in the PS3, like the PS2 emulation in that PS3 wasn't even emulation, but it still doesn't feel right. It still doesn't look and play exactly as it should, which is weird because PS1 I feel does better than PS2 does in that the backwards compatible PS3, which is just one of those strange things. It's kind of the nature of the beast with the PS2. But the point I really wanted to get to was this paywalling thing, and I just wanted to know if it struck you the same way that it struck me, because it's I want there to be some sort of clarity here that shows that that's not the case, but everything I've seen seems to be that is the case, and I'm not seeing them argue it. Like, I'm looking through their YouTube comments, and there's a pretty Samson Point 11, pretty close to the top here. To paraphrase, everything about this pay more to let your hardware do what it can already do model is repugnant. And apparently they did something similar. He says here, when you added new features to the DC Digital, that's their Dreamcast only DC digital out that they made a while back, while leaving early adopters in the cold, I didn't like it, but I accepted your reasoning that the hardware was different. I still think you could have added some new functionality to the original release, but I let it go. But now it seems like that was part of a larger trend, treating firmware like some kind of licensed software that has completely sucked all the air out of the room, and I will definitely not be buying and installing any of these, so that remains the case. What I don't understand is, like, I feel like the intent here was, we want there to be a $99 option for people who don't need, like, exactly what you're saying. Like, I don't need my PlayStation 2 games to be running in 4K, because to me, that's crazy. 720p is perfectly fine by me, right? So if that's the case, then have there be a $99 version that just doesn't do this. But instead, they made it like, they just made the really good one and blocked off a bunch of the content. It's like, that doesn't seem like the right way to do it. I understand physically manufacturing two different things would be a whole other project, but that might have been better than paywalling content that's capabilities that are already on there. Like, it all feels really weird to me.
I'm looking at their website right now. The Retro GEM does direct mode up to 720. Has whatever the fuck Bob is, integer, and basic scan lines. The GEM, so the thing that you're buying that you have to unlock additional shit for, goes up to a 1440p deinterlacer, weave and motion adaptive scaler, which I don't know shit about shit. That sounds important. That sounds like a thing that I want. Scaling right, considering, like, I'm just trying to think of, putting, I don't know, whatever fucking PlayStation 1 game I would want to, but Metal Gear Solid, right? Because that's Metal Gear Solid. Let's just say that I want to put that one on right now. And I want it, like, I have a 75-inch TV, right? That's hanging on my wall currently. How bad is that going to look if I don't have a scaler? Maybe that's not what fucking scaler means. But to me, that, like, when I look at this, so the fucking $100 one doesn't have that. Free custom retro FX, I don't know what the fuck that means. And then adaptive and slot masks. Whatever any of the fuck that means. I don't see anything here in the Shiny Edition that it shouldn't do for $100. And I, like, not having that stuff, like, just locking that shit off, that feels really shitty.
Yeah.
That
not
feels
too thrilled about that.
Shitty. Man, I am so out of my fucking element on this, though. Because this is just not at all how I play older, like, retro games. It's not at all what I do. I think the practicality of physical systems like this as a thing moving forward. I just don't think it's the way we're all going to be doing it within a couple of years. And when I say a couple, I mean, 10 years maybe. I don't know. I just like the practicality of having all of these different systems. And like what I think is really shitty about this, looking at it, is that to me, and correct me if I'm wrong here if they did something in the video, this is $100 thing that I mod into my system.
Yes, this is an internal mod. This is something you need to install into your system or have somebody install for you.
Right. So like, because I look at what the fuck is that thing? The Game Boy Advance thing that just came out. What is that shit?
Game Boy Advance thing that just came out.
The Pocket. What is
the
it?
analog
Who made
Pocket.
that? The analog Pocket, right? Okay. So the analog Pocket, like, I don't know, like that's just one device that works with 3 different systems and does like all of the shit for 3 systems. I know there's like adapters for that one too. So like, I don't know, it feels kind of shitty. I don't know, I feel like this is a thing that you should just be able to plug and play into whatever.
Well, you kind of already
because
can.
That's what I can do on my computer.
Well, see, that's the thing. You kind of already can. What it seems like to me, for people who want to play games on their original hardware, is this kind of future of flash carts and ODEs, right?
Right.
That's what seems to be where this is all going. So, like, if you want to play Dreamcast games the way Dreamcast games were meant to be played, right, with original hardware, in the future, you would want it to have an HDMI mod so that it can connect to any modern television and look and feel the way it's supposed to. And you would want to replace the disk drive or some other option. Install an ODE in the system some way, shape, or form so you can load all
to boot the games. Yeah.
Just load all your ISOs or ROMs or whatever onto that thing, basically just like a flash card. That seems to be the wave of the future for quote unquote purists who want to play it on original hardware, like me. Right. When I want to play a Dreamcast game, I want to plug a Dreamcast controller in a Dreamcast system and hear the VMU go beep. Yeah, and then hear the engine in the inside of the Dreamcast go, and then start playing Sonic Adventure or whatever. But you know, that authentic experience,
that authentic headache is what I'm looking for.
But what and this is slightly outside of my purview as well, and I'd like to talk to somebody who knows a lot more about this than me. The concept of running this internal thing, like how much different is this from using something like a RetroTink, where a RetroTink is a thing that you plug the system into, whatever system, or DVD player, or a VCR, you plug whatever you have with regular audio video cables or component cables, you plug that into a RetroTink, which then converts it to an HDMI signal, quite well, mind you, and then that goes to your television. Right, so if you get high quality cables like the HD Retrovision cables that run from your system to a RetroTink, and then a RetroTink through HDMI to your TV, why is that different or worse than internally modding your system? So you don't have to have a RetroTink. I don't know.
But I buy one. How much is a RetroTink?
That's a great question that I don't recall. How much is the current Tink going for? Let's see. Kind of depends on what flavor you're looking at, but like the RetroTink 2X Pro, which is the smexiest one, it's about $130 retail.
Okay, perfect. All right, so the top of the line thing that does all the shit you just said really well is $130.
Yeah, and I don't have to mod my system or anything.
Right, I don't have to take my system apart. I don't have to take it to somebody and then pay additional money to do this. I don't have to buy ribbon cables separately. I don't have to do any of the things that these guys are talking about. And I can plug legit anything I own into it for $130. Or, with this model, I can pay $100 to not get all of the features multiple times for multiple systems.
Indeed you do. Now, I guess there is something
that seems really dumb to me. That seems like a waste of money.
Now, of course, if you want to have multiple systems connected to a TV, like I do, then you would have to buy, unless you want to switch the cables out manually for every system, you would have to buy a RetroTink for each platform, right? Because it only has one set of inputs and outputs.
But can you not go from a switcher into the RetroTink, or is that too much signal degradation?
Well, I guess that depends on that depends on you. I don't see any problem.
I can't imagine it's that much.
If it's, yeah, I guess I can. That's a solid point. Get an HDMI or a multi-switch thing, plug the multi-switch into the RetroTink, let it upscale from there. I'm sure you will get some sort of degradation, but that just kind of reminds me of...
But how much?
Yeah, exactly. How much?
Like, at what point, are you just tilting at windmills?
Yeah, how serious are you? Like, I'm not going to notice a difference, probably. Like, I did a post earlier today on SAG social media about the level hike cables, right? So level hike are these they're these cheap ass cables, right? But they're HD compatible cables for these all retro systems. Hardcore nuts kind of hate these things. So I'm usually kind of reluctant to post about them. But one of them that I genuinely like, because I've used it, is the PSP one, right? Because how awesome was it that the PSP 2000 and 3000 had video out? Which I thought was really cool, but it looked kind of cruddy. So these are, Level Hike has a PSP HDMI cable. That's fucking cool, right? So I made a video about it a while back, and I used it to play Mega Man Powered Up on an HD TV, and it wasn't perfect, but it was great. It had no input lag to the best of my ability. I'm not running it through a computer program to monitor input lag, but
nor should you. That's fucking absurd.
Did not feel laggy to me in the least. You can see me on the video, press the button, and Mega Man immediately shoots. No noticeable lag at all. And this is on a cheapo Level Hike cable. So I posted about it, and somebody jumped into the comments on Twitter about, you shouldn't be promoting these things. They're garbage, and there are better options out there. And I'm like, as respectful as I could, look, not everybody cares about the ultimate fidelity of this as much as you do. And here's a video of me using it.
Most people don't care.
Exactly. And I think a lot of the people who really care about making the best of these the best possible signal out of these things, I think there's a lot of people in that community that don't realize how few people really care that much more about it. And so I posted the video about it, of me using it with no input lag, because this big argument was this introduces all this what was the word he used? Given the variable latency, no, it isn't fine. None of these dongles are good. And I'm like...
I've already stopped listening when you say shit like that.
To which I responded, well, I don't agree. Here's me using this thing with no noticeable input lag, and the screen looks just fine. I played through Mega Man Powered Up with this cable, well, as long as my battery lasted, which my PSP didn't last that long, but I played it for a couple of stages.
I played for fine. 8 minutes.
And he got the point. That was the thing. He understood the point. He said, "So there, I suppose he said, I suppose the level hike cables aren't completely out merit." And he then followed up by saying he hopes that we can carry some higher quality stuff, which I hope we can too. I like having those options, because for people who really do want the highest quality signal, there are cool options out there. They're just not super accessible. The thing about the level hike cables is that they're super accessible. They're just plug and play. They're not the highest quality things in the world, but they don't always have to be. It reminds me. Yeah.
It reminds me so much of sitting with my good friend John, and he is a speaker nut, right? He's an audiophile. Okay.
Yes.
And he would spend just thousands of dollars on what appeared to me to be just the most minuscule of upgrades, and like stupid shit of like, well, this speaker wire is made of this material, so it reduces the fucking whatever. And he'd be like, he would put a fucking CD on or whatever, and he's a big fucking metalhead, so he'd put on like, a fucking Metallica's Black Album, right? Like just this wall of sound and all of these different guitar tracks. There's like most of the songs on the Black Album have like 128 guitar tracks and like just absurd shit like that. And he'd be like, you can hear all of the different fucking subtle nuances. And I'd be like, no, I fucking can't, John. And neither can you. You can't fucking hear it either. Because you don't have superhuman ears. Shut the fuck up. Like,
look, if it makes him happy.
No, sure. But he was a dick about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
there's
my friend John.
Don't be a dick about it.
I love him to pieces. And if Tiff was here right now, she would and if John was here right now, John would back it up as well. All of us that love John also understand that he is a fucking asshole. He is an asshole of the highest degree. And like, he was such a fucking dick about this stuff. And it, for most of us, like scientifically, there's been studies done on the capability of the human ear and the human eyeball. And most of us can't see this shit or hear this shit unless it is pointed out to us in a slowed down video where we look at it, we tilt our head to the side, slightly askew, shut our eyes, we squint a little, and we go, I mean, yeah, I guess. That's about the best we get, is yeah, I guess. And like, I don't know, man. It's fucking crazy, this kind of shit. Like the fucking gold-plated nickel titanium alloy fucking superconductor connect. Like, shut up. Fucking stop it. There comes a point where the difference, and like also too, like when you're talking about input lag, like input lag is definitely annoying. It's definitely annoying.
Oh, I have things to say about that in the very near future.
But there are how many, like, in all of the games that I've emulated over all of the years, like since the very beginning, like of being a teenager, and like, no shit, I can put all the Nintendo games on my computer? Get the fuck out of here. Like, even going back years and years and years, the amount of times where I have been playing a game and input lag has actually mattered and detracted from the experience have been almost non-existent.
Oh wow, I am super sensitive to input lag.
So am I. I'm saying it's not really there for a lot of emulation thing. The one game that I still have a monster issue with that input lag matters the most to me has always been, and I think will always be, Punch-Out.
Punch-Out, yeah.
Punch-Out's the one. Apart from Punch-Out, me personally, I have never experienced input lag to a point where I have felt it either remarkable or game ruining. In all of the different... and I do not have a big fancy computer by any stretch of the amount. I am running a fucking 6 or 7 year old all-in-one HP bullshit. It's got a Core i3. I don't know what the fuck that means. I know it's not new, is what I know. And I can still play everything accurately and enjoyably with the setup that I have. Except for Punch-Out.
Yeah, Punch-Out's tough because that one really does require split-second timing. But like so, Wii U, NES games on Wii U.
Okay.
Anything that requires twitch reflexes, but even far more than Punch-Out, even Super Mario Brothers, I find very, very difficult to play on Wii U because the way that those games were emulated on Wii U introduced a very noticeable amount of input lag. Whereas, like, I press the button and then I see them jump. and it's like noticeable. That's always bothered me. The most recent, I don't want to say killer, but definitely hurt the experience a lot. Was I got to the new Gimmick release.
Yeah.
Huge fan of Gimmick. My friend Sal introduced me to the game. I don't love it as much as him, only because I don't think anyone loves it as much as him.
That's fair.
But I think the game's wonderful. It's just such a wonderful game, and I was so thrilled that it's coming out physically. I'm still happy it's coming out here in North America. But
yeah,
I played it for like 15 minutes and was like, wow, that is noticeable. See, now Gimmick is a very, very precise game that involves a lot of like momentum and stuff to your movements. But there's a lot of precision jumping in that game. And I beat it on my CRT on a flash card. That's how I played the game, because it was never released in America. And that's how I beat the game. It was very difficult for me to get through the game, which I finished today, just because of the lag. Like, the input lag was severe, and it's a
but
real
that's more
bummer.
That's a concern with the programming, right?
I mean, I guess I would have to assume it's because of the emulation. I'm not enough of a tech head to say that, but I believe that however they're emulating this game, right? Because it is just running the NES game. It hasn't been reprogrammed or remade. It's just running the NES game through a program. And it's the same. Apparently, it's the same on Steam, because I asked Sal if he had gotten the game. He said, yeah, he played through the Steam one. He got all the achievements and 100%ed it, because this dude knows this game well. But he said that there was a really noticeable input lag. I was like, all right, just want to make sure that I'm not crazy, or if it's just the controller that I'm using or something. So I used a couple different controllers, and no matter what I did with the Switch version, handheld or not, there was noticeable input lag, which made... I was thrilled to have a rewind button, because that made a lot of stuff a lot easier to eventually pull off. But like, it was noticeable, and it really changes the feel of the game. But back to the Super Mario Brothers thing, like, I know that game so well from beating it dozens upon dozens of times as a kid, that whenever I play it, I just play it through muscle memory. I'm barely, especially for the first couple of stages, I'm not even reacting to what's on the screen. I'm just muscle memorying my way through it.
What you do, yeah.
And when that muscle memory doesn't work, I'm like, I should have hit this jump, but I didn't, because I pressed the button when I landed on the block, and I needed to press it before I landed on the block now, because the timing is different because of input lag. So I've run into a lot of situations on various pieces of hardware that have introduced input lag in ways that have made games considerably more difficult for me to play. But I guess it's just that we all play games differently and experience them differently. I don't know, but
yeah, I mean, I would also argue that I don't think I know a game, apart from maybe Mega Man 2, as well as quite a few games. That's just not how I play them, And again, I think I would argue same way in kind of an audiophile kind of way, like, I don't know, am I the minority or you?
That's a tough question. I really don't know. I always assume that it's me. I always assume I'm the crazy one.
I mean, I think with our audience, perhaps, like, I would be in the minority here. However, I would argue that for the vast majority of people, we don't play games the way that you do. I don't know, man. I don't know.
I don't either. It's all very interesting. But yeah,
regardless, this thing feels shitty.
Yes, this new thing feels shitty, and the Gimmick re-release is not nearly as... It's not terrible, but it's not as good as this game deserves. And I'm really hoping that the Trip World one that's coming from Limited Run and Carbon Engine is better than this, because not only does it introduce input lag, but it's also pretty bare bones, which is kind of disappointing. Like, they've got box art and cartridge scans and manual scans, and that's very cool, but like, there's no scan line filter options. There's no way to turn off the weird extra score counters that are in the margins. Like you
That's
can't
kind
just
of a
turn
weird
off
choice.
a border. You can turn off the border except for these. The score one I don't get. There's this giant score counter, and like, okay, but there's a score counter in the actual in-game HUD.
Right.
So why do I need this other one? It's just duplicating information that's already on the screen. I'm very confused as to why this is here and why I can't turn it off. It's very bizarre to me. But like, it's also, and Sal actually pointed this out to me, and I thought it was a really good point. So this game was released only in Japan and Scandinavia.
Okay. That's a weird two fucking places to release something.
Isn't it? It's such a bizarre thing. So
the
Scandinavian
how often
one,
do you hear like Japan, and Scandinavia? It's very
I
similar.
think this might be the only one.
Very similar people.
So you can only play the Japan version, which has like the game itself is identical. I think identical, except the title screen, right? Because the Scandinavian game is Mr. Gimmick, and the Japanese game is Gimmick. But besides the title screen, the game itself is identical, except the soundtrack. Because like Castlevania 3, the Famicom cart used this like extra chip to make it sound super cool, and the other one sounds just like it works just on the limitations of an NES as far as the sound goes. So it has a legit different sounding soundtrack.
Okay.
So why not have both versions of the game in there? I mean, if you're going this bare bones, like there are other options they could have thrown in there to make this feel a little bit more in depth.
Yeah.
And like I'm looking at the way that especially, I mean, I think this is a game that could have used the whole like the treatment that Digital Eclipse is given to Karateka, but then again, I think tons of games could use that.
Well,
but even if you're not going that far, like I feel like there could have been more done to this, I think, besides making sure that it plays as good as humanly possible, which definitely didn't happen here, which is a real bummer because this game really does deserve that kind of treatment. Now, granted, this is better than it's ever been playable in North America. It's also better than it's ever been playable re-released. I believe this game was on a PS2, I think, Japanese compilation, and it played just dreadfully there. Looked bad and had terrible input lag. This has manageable but very noticeable input lag, which is a bummer because this is going to be so many people's first time experiencing this game, and they're not going to get the feeling of what the game's supposed to feel like to play.
Okay.
And NES emulation on Switch can be flawless. I mean, we've seen it. I can beat Punch-Out through Nintendo Switch Online, right?
Right.
And that's not even the best NES emulation in the history of mankind. So, like, come on now. We can do better than this, and I'm kind of sad that this game didn't get it. But we'll see what happens with Trip World, which is not being handled by the same company at all. So, we shall see. Gimmick's a great game. It deserved a little bit better than this, but it's still worth picking up, especially if it goes on sale at some point. The end. We should probably start moving on. Did you play anything like super important? Because I have one other game in particular I need to talk about. But yeah, did you do anything?
I finished my climb back up to infinite in Snap, which made me quite happy. Just to get that out of the way, playing with a different deck than I had ever played. I played with an Iron Patriot, Iron Lad fucking thing. It's a really fun deck. This game just continues to be really fun, even with all of the bullshit that they have done recently. And god damn it, I want to talk about Inscription so bad. I want to talk about this fucking game. I'm so madly head over heels in love with it, and I think it's just the fucking cat's pajamas. But I don't want to spoil any of it I know a couple of our listeners picked it up, like we've been talking about in the Discord a little bit and whatever, and I just don't want to spoil anything yet. I've made my way to the third act, and it's so good. It's so clever and interesting and does things to subvert your expectations of what it is that you're actually playing and what is actually going on in the larger overall story is just so fucking cool. This game is like, and what I think the thing that I find most interesting about it, and I don't know how this has happened to be a thing, but if you search on Google for Inscription for the game, you have to scroll a fair bit before you get to anything remotely spoilery. Like, everything about this game that is on the internet, all of the images that you see are specifically from Act 1. And it is such a difference when you get, like, there's no like, I wonder if I'm in the second act of the game. It's like, nope, this is Act 2 of the game. Like, it might as well just come out and say, fucking Act 2. And when you get to Act 3, there is no doubt that you have gotten there. And the fact that none of that is spoiled by doing a cursor search online is awesome. And like, as we've been playing through it, you know, and learning some more about the game, the card game that you play, the main focus of the game is also a playable card game that you can just go on like itch.io or something like that. Katie and Penn have been playing like Roblox versions of the card game, because the story for Inscription was that the card game was made first in like a game jam kind of thing, like a 48 hour game jam. And the team behind it came up with this like really cool card game. And then as they had this really cool card game, they got an idea to flesh out a story and a world and all of that stuff. So there exists both versions of this particular thing, just the card game and this larger overall story, which I just think is really fucking cool.
Huh.
You gotta play it, man. You have to. I don't think it's going to grab you the way it's grabbed me. I do think it is going to grab you in a fucking sexy kind of way, though. It's so good.
Huh. Okay. Inscription it is. I'll add it to the list.
Yeah. Unkillable Squirrel is what Tiff and I went with. We found a way, because the way, and this isn't spoiling anything. So the card game that you're playing, in order to get cards out on the board, you have to sacrifice cards to get like higher cost shit out. So kind of the way that you would play like Magic, where you have to put lands down on the board and you have to tap, like, I need this cost 2 light lands. So I put 2 light lands out, and when I have the 2, I can tap those, and then I can put this creature out that costs 2. At the end of my turn, I untap them, whatever. Okay? In this game, you have to put out no-cost creatures like a squirrel or a rabbit or whatever, and then you have to sacrifice them to get blood to put your creatures out. So, like, I have a squirrel, and I sacrifice a squirrel, I get 1 blood, and I put out a stoat, or I put out a bullfrog, or whatever. Or if I want to put a hawk out, that's 2 blood, so I have to draw 2 squirrels, and then sacrifice both squirrels and whatever. When you sacrifice them, obviously, the word is sacrifice, they are gone, right? There is 1 card that you can get that is an unkillable cat, and it's got, like, a lot of the cards have, like, these different sigils on them. And it's a very, very easy card game to learn. It has the unkillable symbol on it. So you can sacrifice this cat over and over and over again and continue to get blood to get your creatures out. So, like, if I put 2 if I have 2 unkillable cats on the board and I have something that costs, 3 blood, a creature that I want to put down, well, I can put out a squirrel, sacrifice the squirrel, sacrifice my 2 cats. They don't go anywhere. They actually still stay on the board for the next turn, and now I've got my 3-cost creature out, right? So all of this stuff, like, really, really works. However, as you're going through the story of the game, you come upon and the way it's told is so fucking clever. It's so good. And I don't want to spoil it, but you come upon a wood carver, and the wood carver has these different totems that she is carving, and all of the bottom half of the totems have different sigils on them, right? So like one of them will be flying, and one of them will be blocking flying, and one of them will be unkillable. There are secrets around this cabin, because you can get up from the table in between the card game. You have to progress the story. You find like these secrets throughout the cabin, and there's one particular secret that you find where you get a squirrel head. All right, and I'm not going to say how you get the squirrel head, but you can get a squirrel head. And if you put that on the unkillable totem, then you get unkillable fucking squirrels. And once you have unkillable squirrels, oh my god, right? Unkillable squirrels would be the fucking worst. Once you get them in the game, though, it's pretty much game over. Like, you are going, if you can get to that point, every squirrel that you pull out will, from that point, be an unkillable squirrel. It's fucking awesome. It was so good. Like, Tiff and I were so happy when we figured it out. We were like, unkillable squirrel! Like, we're fucking yelling in the living room. The kids come running down. What are you talking about? It's such a fucking good game. And then it goes completely different direction. It's so fucking awesome. I love it.
I just added it to my Switch wish list.
Yeah,
it is there,
and it's pretty cheap too. Like, I don't know.
It's $20.
Yeah, it goes on sale quite a bit. I'm really so here's how much I like this game, Chris. I got this game as part of PlayStation Plus. Right, so I didn't get it for free because I pay for PlayStation Plus, whatever it is, $120 a year or whatever the fuck. So I didn't get this game for free, but I did immediately, upon getting to the second act, I was like, I got to give this guy some fucking money. This is awesome. Let me find this game if it's been released physically. And one of the companies that it wasn't limited run that did the physical release. It is sold out, the physical whatever, and this is something that we will talk about as well when we get to the second half of our show. But Special Reserve Games was doing the physical release for Inscription. And
I see.
It is sold out on the PS5, the both unnumbered and numbered special editions on the PS5 and the Switch are both sold out. So I was like, well, I guess I'm not giving you. And I apologize. But fucking awesome. They do have a physical edition. There are less... Or no, it's sold out now. It wasn't sold out the other day. They were selling Gato Roboto on the Switch for $30 here.
Right, yeah, I saw that one, and I liked Gato Roboto a lot, but like it's super short, and I can't justify $30 on that.
Yeah,
Fantastic game though.
I considered, and I don't know, I still might, but I already bought it once. I really like Death's Door, but they have the PS5 physical for $35, which isn't a bad price, and I think that game is so great. I know you haven't finished it yet.
No, it was really good.
Did you finish it?
No, I didn't finish it.
Okay.
But I really enjoyed my time with it.
Yeah. I think it's fucking... But I've already paid for it. You know, I paid full price when it came out.
Therein lies the rub.
I paid full
you
price
bought it for me,
it,
too.
And I bought it for you. Do I now need to buy it physically? Like, I just don't think I do. You know? I don't know that I don't. But anyway, what have you played? Okay.
Really not. I mean, I guess I kind of am. I'm surprised. So like I said a few weeks ago, I got assigned the review for Everybody 1-2 Switch, and played it with the kids, and it was fine. It was all right.
Yeah.
I hate this weird horse-headed host. I think I talked about that already.
You did, yeah.
That's like, it's not even an original character. You just took this existing horse head
Yeah.
And I don't like that. But in order to properly review this game, I needed to play it with, in a couple of different settings that it's intended to be played is.
Yeah.
All right, because all right, let me play it with kids. Okay, that went all right. It was kind of fun. Could have went better. Could have went worse. But I needed to play it with a bunch of adults. So that's what I did last night. I had 4 friends over, so there was a total of 6 of us playing the game.
Mm-hmm.
It was a fucking blast.
And you're angry about that?
I'm kind of annoyed that I have to give this game a good review because that horse character bothers me so much.
Yeah.
But damn if we did not have an absolute blast playing this game. It's really fucking clever. Some of them are. Some of the games are really clever, and even the ones that aren't super clever they're just executed really well. Which is, I'm kind of annoyed by it, to be perfectly honest. When I'm working on the last Zelda video right now, and it covers the launch of the Switch, and going back and looking at that first Switch announcement video where they showed 1-2 Switch, and I was so angry that game's existence was a thing.
We should really erase those 2 episodes of the podcast. we were so fucking wrong.
I stand by that Switch was a 1-2 Switch was a fucking mistake. But that's the thing. Okay, so here's what's interesting. When I played with the kids, we all played with Joy-Cons.
Right.
When we played the first match with everybody here, we played with Joy-Cons.
Right.
And it was really fun. It was great. But the game really took off when we switched from Joy-Cons to phones.
Okay.
Because this game, if you're playing with Joy-Cons, I think it can go up to 8 players. But if you're playing with phones, it can go up to 100.
That's quite a few.
Insane. That's nuts. We were all first pretty upset because we're like, all right, well let's see if 2 of you can use phones, the rest of us stick with Joy-Cons. So no, you're either playing with phones or you're playing with Joy-Cons. And I thought that was kind of shitty until I realized that there were phone exclusive games, which is why they do it that way.
Okay.
And that's when shit got really cool, when we started getting into the phone exclusive games. There was this one game that I thought was incredibly clever. It's this style themed one. And all the presentations are kind of ridiculous. Mm-hmm. They're all really sort of cheap looking, but they have real actors just sitting still and slideshow kind of things, but they're all voice acted and kind of melodramatically acted and whatnot. It's very bizarre. This one's all set up like a style thing. It's they give you a color. And they say, all right, here is this shade of orange. Use your phone's camera, because you don't download an app. You just go to this website. You scan a QR code on your phone, and then it brings you to a website that lets you interact with the game. And it says, all right, here's this specific shade of orange. You have 30 seconds to find the closest match you can. And whoever has you take a picture of whatever item that has the closest match to this specific shade of orange, and whoever's the closest gets the most points, and your team, whatever team, gets the most points from doing that.
Yeah.
It's really fun. So we're here in my basement, and naturally, my set of Atari color box games came in really fucking handy. It's all the colors of the rainbow right there. But it was really fun. Okay, we all run around the room and try to take pictures of, you have 10, 15 seconds to find something of this color, and you just look around wherever your surroundings are and try to snap a picture of whatever you think the closest color is, and then it tallies it up. It was really it's very simple, but it was really clever.
Yeah.
And another one that was really cool with the phones was this one actually involved one person picking up a Joy-Con. So sometimes the game will be somebody needs a Joy-Con, so grab one. And
somebody fucking get it.
One person, so it always splits you into teams, right? There's always 2 teams. And so one team would be you pick one person to be a swordsman. And then, so one team picks their swordsman, and then the other team, we had 3 people, are all the ones that are going to be throwing ninja stars at them. And so your phone screen has ninja stars on it, and just like with Nintendo Land on Wii U, the Takamaro's Castle thing, where you flick your finger to flick the throwing star at them. Like that's how it would work with throwing the stars. So the three of us are supposed to surround the other player, and the player with the sword is supposed to use the sound that comes out of our phones of flicking the throwing stars as when to swing the Joy-Con to deflect the throwing stars we're throwing at them.
That's kind of cool.
It worked shockingly well, and it was really fun. It was very silly. There are games that annoyed us to no end, but like that was kind of their purpose. Like there was this red light, green light one that was. It was pretty hard when we wound up doing it with the Joy-Cons because we're all looking at the TV to like pay attention. Like there's this obnoxious little shit kid, and if you move even the slightest bit after he turns around and says red light, then like you have to go all the way back to the beginning. And the first team the way we were playing is the first team to get 2 players to the finish would win that round. But when we played it on our phones, the little signifier that shows how much sound, like how much movement you're exhibiting, was on your individual phone screen. So it was kind of easier to follow along and easier to get the whole game accomplished. Yeah. It was really fun. And it was really stupid, and everybody was drinking, except me, obviously. But everybody was having a good time. Like nobody had any complaints. When we started it up, everyone was like, "Yeah, sure, I'm game. This seems like a really fun idea." Like they were all just kind of like, "This is neat that we get to help you review a video game." And then like they saw the horse, and they're like, "I don't know about this." And then we started
Never mind, I'm out.
We started playing the game, and everybody had a blast. I can't believe how fun this stupid game is. But if you in the right setting, it's an absolute blast. With the kids, it was like we only played a quick match, and the kids got confused and frustrated by some of the games. Yeah. And when we were playing last night, kids, no, is not the right route for this, especially kids who are easily frustrated, because there are a lot of like little things in the movement of your Joy-Con or your phone that aren't always going to be 100% accurate. Right. And that's part of the chaos of the game. And if you can't handle chaos, then this game's going to just make you upset. Right. But if you're there for the ridiculousness of chaos, then this is they do that Mario Party shit, but it's even worse. Where like I was on one team and we were up 2-1. Right, we only needed to win one more, and they're like, "You're kicking this other team's ass, so we're going to give them a chance here. Pull out some cards, right?" And they had to pick one card. And they picked a card that gave them two wins, so it tied up the whole thing. It's like fucking bullshit.
That sucks.
But it was hilarious. Like, yes, it sucks, but for some reason, it was more forgivable than when that shit happens in Mario Party, because it didn't really feel like any of the games were coming so down to skill. It was all like, it was all just pure ridiculousness. So it still pissed us all off, but to a way less extent than it would in Mario Party. I don't know. It's a great fucking game. It is a really good party game, and I can't believe that's the case, because that really horse character is fucking terrible.
Yeah.
Outside as long as you're having specific settings of having fun with other adult humans, I cannot possibly recommend this game.
Like, this is not a game that you're going to play on your own. Like, I just got to get through it.
No, because there doesn't seem to be anything to unlock. There is nothing for a single player here. There is nothing for any situation that isn't a bunch of friends hanging out, probably drinking. That's it. That's as far as it goes.
Yeah, I mean, that's not the worst. Not the worst thing in the world.
Yeah.
Well, that's fucking wild. That's wild.
Wild and unexpected, but here we are. All right. Obviously, I'm still playing Zelda. I get to review Annalyn, which I'm excited about. That game's great. I'm still working on the Lightning Temple. I played a little bit more of the Lightning Temple tonight. That's a really good temple so far. It's very cool. I fought this really awesome Queen Gibdo thing, which then flew up to the top of the temple, and I'm like, all right, guess we're going through the temple now. And yeah, it's great. It's great. Love the game. Let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about game preservation. Shit, it's already 11 o'clock. No, we can do this. We're doing it tonight. Doing it live. You're listening to the Stone Age Gamer podcast from Geekade.com. Stick around. Hi everyone, Kris here. Podcast listening is free, but podcast creation is not. That's why the Geekade Patreon exists. In an effort to help us pay the bills, we've got a Patreon page set up where you can gain access to our monthly podcast topic schedule, get early access to many of our shows, and more. If you'd like to help support Geekade and keep these shows running week after week, head over to the Geekade Patreon page, linked in the show notes of this very podcast. Hi, we're back. We've returned. Dan peed all over his laundry. It was a good time.
Oh my god. Everywhere. I have to rewash. Literally everything.
So we're going to talk a little bit about game preservation, because that's a thing, that's a talking point that's been floating around the internet since, well, really more last week than this, but still, it's a conversation that's always worth having. And Dan, why don't you talk a little, get us started. Why don't you kick things off? You seemed like you had a lot of notes and things to say here. So what do you got for me?
That was last week. So I'm pulling up this article that I read on Kotaku, and I'm trying to find the original article here. And what I thought was really interesting about it, in this article, is they came out with a study, right? So there's this group called the Video Game History Foundation. Okay. There's another group called the Software Preservation Network. There's like a bunch of these different digital archivists that exist in the world. There are fewer in the video game space versus like movies and books and that sort of thing, where they're trying to digitize and preserve things, but they do exist. So they did a joint study, right? And this number kind of stuck out to me. According to their study, there are 87% of classic, what we would consider retro games. So we're basically talking PlayStation 2 and prior, okay? 87% of those games are not in release anywhere. And this is going across, platforms and genres and all of those things. This is taking into account what you can purchase digitally on current systems. This is obviously excluding things like going into a convention and being able to pick up things there, right? That is not considered a widely available release. And the way they compared it was to how when a new format came around for movies, it's not like old movies were no longer available. I had never really considered it that way, right? Of like, if I bought Star Wars on Betamax, for example, and then I got a VHS player, well, then I just went to the store and I bought Star Wars on VHS. And then if I wanted Star Wars for my fancy new Laserdisc player, I just went to the store and I bought Star Wars, right? And DVDs and Blu-rays, and I can go to the store today and there's a plethora of options for Star Wars. I can get the DVD, I can get the Blu-ray, I can get the Ultra 4K Blu-ray, probably. I don't know, I haven't checked, but I assume that's a thing that Star Wars has done at this point, right? I can just go to the store and get this movie that was released in fucking 1978. No problem. I cannot walk into a store and buy Super Metroid. And I had never really considered looking at it in that way. Right now, obviously, there are some problems with that comparison because it's not a one-to-one kind of thing. There are not 100% of movies that are readily available. There are titles that have been lost forever that are just not coming back. There are episodes of Doctor Who, very famously, that people have been just scouring the planet trying to complete some of these classic serials and whatnot. But the main thing that really sticks out, I think, is that the most popular, the highest selling, the biggest of the big is still readily, easily available for whatever format you would like it for. And video games do not follow that.
I agree. Good night.
I don't know how much of a problem that actually is. What do you think?
Well, I mean,
as somebody who is very much team physical, right? You are very much on team physical.
I am very much on team physical, but I'm very much on team both. I love digital games. I love that that's a thing, because it allows so many more games to exist, right? Because there are a lot of games that just would never make it to market if they required being put on cartridges, right? Now there's the whole other backwards angle of that, like, oh, I bought this digital only game and now it's available physically. The only way for me to get that is to buy it again. That kind of sucks, but at the same token, the physical one never would have happened had the digital one not been popular enough to begin with. And had a physical been a requirement, which we all know from decades of existing before digital marketplaces did, that game probably wouldn't have existed, you know?
Right.
Like, would Vampire Survivors have ever been actually made on home consoles had the digital market not existed?
Right.
I don't know.
Probably not.
It's entirely probable that no, it wouldn't have been. So yeah, I'm on team video games is the only way I'll say it.
Sure.
I do think it's an interesting thing because the big difference between books and movies is the formats, right?
Right.
Like this movie on Blu-ray or DVD or Laserdisc or Betamax, that movie is that movie no matter what format it gets put on, right? There's nothing intrinsically different about that movie.
Not Star Wars. But
but that's not the same movie anymore. It's legitimately a different movie at that point. That's a podcast for another podcast.
That actually does bring up a somewhat interesting point, though. But finish what you were going to say.
If you release a Wii U game on any platform that isn't a Wii U, it is no longer the same experience. It's not this, like, that movie is going to be the same experience no matter what you watch it on, you know, minus some visual fidelity or something, but the content is not going to be different.
Right.
But a Wii U game, or let's even take it even further, like Boktai without that sun sensor is not the same game. It's no longer the same experience.
Right.
So the fact that there's this whole other aspect to it, like there are so many different physical hardwares that these games were made for, and not only do they create different experiences because of unique hardware, but even when the hardware itself isn't really all that unique, it's just is its own different thing. The games were designed to work on that specific hardware. They weren't designed to work universally. They're not like movies or books where this universal experience. Like a book could be printed on 16 different kinds of paper. That's never going to change the content of the book. But a Watara Supervision game would need to be ported to a different system. You can't you can't play a Watara Supervision game without a Watara Supervision. It's just video games don't work like that. So on one hand,
it's kind of interesting in what you like in how you say that, though, because and Star Wars just kind of triggered it for me. If you want to watch a particular version of Star Wars, it is very similar to if you want to play a particular game for the Wii. You have to own or have access to a specific hardware format to access that film. Because
the trouble there is that case is, in that case, that is that movie, that content specifically and intentionally being withheld. Whereas a lot of the stuff that has not been preserved is not because it's being withheld. It's because those companies just no longer exist.
Right.
And that's a huge difference between, if you look at, let's say Konami, right? Every Konami game is not currently available. Rocket Knight Adventures for Sega Genesis has never been ported to anything else ever. It's only on Sega Genesis. And that's not, as far as I know, at last I heard, the story of that is that's not because somebody at Konami is like, no, I don't want people to play this game. That's just straight up negligence is the only reason Rocket Knight Adventures isn't currently available, is just flat out negligence, or that it's never been made available in the last 20 years. Whereas Star Wars is the creator of that original movie that created history saying, I no longer want people to have access to that. This is the vision that I think people should have. So where the Library of Congress says Star Wars should be in the Library of Congress, and George Lucas says, here's Star Wars Special Edition, and the Library of Congress says, fuck off, that's not the movie. That's a different movie that you have altered. We want the original experience that actually made history, not this. And George Lucas refuses to give that up. That's that is willful attempting to change history, which is totally different from the situation of video games, where it's not not all video games, right? Because a lot of the licensed stuff is also pretty intentional, but it all comes down to, well, no, if we're not gonna release Yo-Noid because we need to get paid for Yo-Noid. Domino's needs to make a fucking buck off of this NES game. If Capcom wants to re-release Yo-Noid, Domino's is getting a fucking piece of that pie. And if that pie isn't big enough, then sorry, we're never going to re-release Yo-Noid for NES. It's just going to live in obscurity, because I would rather no one be able to play it ever
than I not get paid for it.
Than not get paid what we think we deserve for it.
What's really interesting about that is that there are laws, right? There are laws against DRM law, right? Digitally copying things. The DMCA, the Digital Millennium Copyright, right, says that you are not allowed to copy or distribute any DRM protected material. However, exceptions have been made for libraries and researchers to be able to archive digital content, except for video games.
Video games. There are specific lobbies that are
against.
They are against this existing because it potentially cuts into their profits.
Which is so fascinating that not even a library can digitize a copy of Yo-Noid and have it so that it's preserved. Not even, because this article also brings up the fact that, wouldn't it be cool if there were, digital libraries that had video games to where you could check out a copy of Yo-Noid and play it through, an emulator found on the library's website. Wouldn't that be cool? Even going beyond that, they're not allowed to even archive that shit so that it does exist.
Which is absolutely crazy to me. It's crazy to me to one extent, even though I can see it from the corporate side as well. Like, the whole, what an interesting thing that's happening right now is the whole Mickey Mouse public domain thing, right? Like, Mickey Mouse, once a character becomes 100 years old, then it goes into public domain. Right. And it was written, I'm assuming the laws were written before anyone could conceive of a character. Of
something being around for 100 years.
Right? But, like, now on one hand, I understand that, this is the law of the land. Mickey Mouse should absolutely become public domain. But on the other hand, I don't mean to side with corporations, but, like, even pretend they weren't a giant-ass corporation. It's not like they're not still using Mickey Mouse. Like, that's their thing. Like, Mickey Mouse is a regularly used... There's a new Mickey Mouse game coming out on the Switch in, like, a couple of weeks. Like,
I thought it was already out, but yeah.
No, I don't think the Illusion one's out yet. I think it's coming soon. I think it's August. But regardless.
Either way,
I kind of don't feel like Mickey Mouse should be public domain. Like, that's Disney's thing, and I get it. Disney's a giant evil corporation, but, like, even if we're pretending they weren't, like, let's say some other small company created a character that then existed for 100 years, but the company never became a giant corporation like Disney. They just continue to do, like, let's say the Tick is still having a random content created for it after the character's 100 years old.
Right. Winnie the Pooh is a good example.
Yeah, like, I think that fell into the Disney department, but
it is public domain now.
It is public domain now, and it's like, all right, well, should it be? I don't really. I guess I've never really understood the whole thought process behind things becoming public domain. Like, I understand that certain things should become public domain if they're, if they're abandoned, but I feel like if they're still being used by whoever created them, it just doesn't feel right to me that they should become public domain. But I will admit that I'm woefully undereducated on this, so maybe there are aspects of it that I don't understand. But there has always been a certain degree of ownership that I believe. There's always been a certain degree of perceived ownership by people who don't actually create things that I've never really been super comfortable with. And I'm talking largely about the people whose answer to all of everything about, like, there's no legal way for us to back up and preserve these things. And the answer is always, well, just emulate it, just pirate it. There, problem solved. Like, well, we said there's no legal way to do this because, like, at the end of the day, this stuff does belong to someone. If it's abandoned, that's a different story. But if this stuff is actively being used, like, I know this makes me come off as, like, an asshole or a bad guy to a large swath of the video game community, but I don't believe it's always morally correct to pirate all of Nintendo's games. I've seen that meme everywhere. It's always morally correct to pirate all of Nintendo's games. I don't think that's true. I don't think it's always morally correct to pirate all of Sony's games or Microsoft games or anyone's games, because it is never always morally correct to pirate somebody else's property. I just don't.
As soon as you throw always in there, you can't be taken serious.
I thank you. That's kind of how I feel about it. I understand Nintendo's strategy. I don't love it, but I understand it, and it has worked for them. I used to work for a comic book store that a lot of people took issue with the way they did things because they refused to do dollar bins. They absolutely refused to sell a comic for less than cover price because they felt that devalued the comics, that devalued. It was a race to the bottom. It devalued back issues. And I think they were right. I had never thought about it that way until I watched people shop in this store and go through all of these individually priced, individually bagged and boarded back issues. There were no loose comics in that store. Everything was treated with the same level of respect. And people did not mind paying money for those old issues. Old issues that you would find in any other comic book store in a dollar bin. People didn't mind paying like 25 cents over its original cover price because the books had value in that environment. And I thought that was a really good way of doing it, because then you wouldn't have everyone just waiting around for the next sale or waiting around for things to drop down into the dollar bin. Everything has value. Everything retains value. So when people talk about the Nintendo tax and like how their games never drop down below $60, it's like, well, there's a reason for that. It's because they respect their products. And I wish Sony would do that. And I wish Microsoft would do that more. Because when you look at stuff, or other companies would do that more, because when you look at stuff like, here's this new game that was the hot new thing 3 months ago, which is now
and now it's $10.
Now it's $20 less than it was. Like, well, then it just makes people who bought it on day one feel like a sucker. But, you know, here we are on Nintendo's platform, and everyone bitches about the fact that Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is still $60, but it also still sells at $60 because there was a perceived value added to it, because they respect what it is enough to add that perceived value to it. And I always thought that was a really fascinating way of doing things, and I think that's a really good business strategy, but also just a really good way of instilling a degree of respect in what it is that you're making. Because if you're not going to respect your products, then why shouldn't somebody just steal it, right? If you're just going to eventually slog it off and drop it down to nothing and then never sell it again or never treat it with any respect again, then why should anyone care? And now this works in a number of different directions, because like on one hand, yeah, that's great. But on another hand, like, should Wii Music have been $50 constantly forever? Like, no, at a certain point
it definitely should not have been.
At a certain point, you should probably clearance some shit out if it's not going anywhere. But also, like, you know, maybe don't drop it down to $0, but I don't know what the answer is. I really don't. But you see the point I'm trying to make, right?
I do. Like, and there's an interesting thing there, I think, like with bringing up Disney, right? Because Disney has done some interesting things throughout the years. More specifically, back in the day with like the clamshell VHS release,
the Disney Vault,
right? Where that kind of forced scarcity and whatever, which isn't a thing anymore, right? Like, you can go to a store and buy damn near any Disney movie you want.
Disney Plus has just about everything streaming.
And Disney Plus has everything streaming, right? So they do have that digital archive of things. But keeping Disney as a company in mind, right, you're correct, right? There's that new Mickey Mouse and Friends game coming out, where like you Mickey, Minnie, Donald, and Goofy, I think.
Yeah.
The 4 playable all right. So like that is a new game that's coming out, and there was the remake of Castle of Illusions a little while ago that was pretty dope and whatever. And like all of that stuff's fine. The Disney Afternoon Collection, where you can find some of the old Capcom games, that's great. Where if you wanted to play Magic Kingdom, the NES release, you can't.
Right.
That's not a thing you can do. And not because, like you were saying, of, you know, I think it's a fair point with things like Wii and Wii U and certain like motion control games. There is a certain subset of video game history that is much more difficult to preserve in a playable format than other things.
Right.
There is no problem with playing Disney's Magic Kingdom through any computer that is within the last 20 years, you know,
right.
That's been sold. But the only way to do it, the only way it's accessible, is through piracy.
Which I think is crazy, because there's this whole thought process that, well, I have to assume the thought process with the big companies against letting the libraries be able to do this with older games is that, oh, if we do this, then we won't be able to sell as many copies of the games if we ever decide to re-release them. So first off, it's all based on an if, which kind of sucks to begin with. But also, I think it's been proven time and time again that is absolutely not the case.
It just isn't.
Nobody is... I don't think anybody... I can't say because I don't have the raw data, but existing as long as I have and seeing as everything that I have, I don't imagine that the case is that if you were able to play the original Mega Man games on your computer through emulation for free by borrowing them from a library, that a Mega Man collection on a modern platform with save states and rewind features and behind the scenes stuff, or even just the ability to play it on your modern platform instead of on a PC through an emulator, I don't think that affects the sales of that in the least. I've never seen it happen that way, because it seems like logic would dictate once that Earthbound became playable on Nintendo Switch Online, physical copies on eBay would have gone down in value. That never happened ever. If people thought that was going to happen with the Virtual Console, that it was going to kill the secondhand market. Oh, Demon's Crest is finally available. Now at least the physical copies will go down. No, they won't. They didn't, and they never will, because that's
now
not
I gotta get the physical copy, because I've played it, and it's fucking great.
It's fucking great. Now I want to have the original one so that I can have the original artwork and all that stuff. It's
case in point, I own Mega Man 1 through 6 on the NES. I bought those games when they came out. When they did the Mega Man Anniversary Collection on the PS2, I bought the Mega Man Anniversary Collection.
Same here.
When they put the Mega Man collections out on PS5 now, whenever they came out, I think, during the original life cycle, I rebought them again. I have had those Mega Man games emulated on my computer since I got my first emulator 20 fucking years ago. I have still bought those games multiple times over, and would continue to do so.
Because there's a difference between emulating them and playing them in their exact original form and playing them on new hardware with modern accoutrements.
Right. And there is a price factor to that too, because I bought the Mega Man collections for $20. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't pay fucking $60 a piece, and I wouldn't. Because I do happen to fall into that category that you were talking about of, I am never going to pay full price for Super Mario Brothers 2 just ever again. It's not a thing I'm ever going to do. I'm not going to do it for Mega Man. I'm not going to, but like with Nintendo keeping their prices, I thought it was crazy. And we talked about it on the podcast years and years ago, of like, you're putting out Super Mario Brothers on your digital platform for purchase at $5. That's fucking nuts. That should be $1, right? Like, and I still fucking stand by it, and that's fine. But I do think that these things, talking about Mario and talking about Mega Man, like you're talking about big franchise shit like that, but looking to some of the other why did I just forget the name of the game? The stupid game on the NES that's super expensive that came out. Little Samson, thank you. The fact that the only way to experience Little Samson, which is a really fucking good game, it's a really good fucking game, is to either pay an exorbitant amount of money for a physical release, or to fucking steal it. Those are your only options. That's it. And if you don't do those two, like, there's no middle ground. There is no official digital I can't rent it from a library. it's not something seemingly that's ever going to get re-released.
That was Gimmick up until a couple of weeks ago.
Right. That was Gimmick up until a couple, like, yeah, like the fact that you have it just that number, that 87% of video games not being available anywhere, I just find to be such a staggering number. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that like all 87% of those games should be fucking available. Like Cheetah Men for the NES, not necessarily something that I should be able to walk into a store and easily access currently. Because it fucking sucked. It sucked when it came out, it sucks now. But just the fact that there's that large of a number, even going back to shit recent, you know what I mean? Like we're not talking about, we're not talking about like a Wizard of Oz situation here, where this is a movie that's been in production since the fucking 40s, and I've been able to, continuously update my copy of it, or even watch it on a streaming service. Like, just, that's such a huge amount of history that is lost, and that fucking, it matters.
It really does. I mean, we just went through the 3DS eShop closing. 3DS
and those
eShop
games
is
are
gone.
Just gone.
Castlevania, fucking
gone.
Castlevania Adventure Rebirth, it's gone. There's the Castlevania mobile game, right? What was it called? That really awful Castlevania mobile game.
Yes.
Fucking gone.
Gone.
It's, I mean, like, sure, nobody really needs to play it, but just historical context. That is a thing, that is an officially made and released Castlevania game that came out for a specific kind of fucking flip phone. And it's fascinating, and there's nothing you can do about it. You just can't play it. It's not out there unless you steal it. And it's very rare in the world of, movies, television, and books and whatever, that if you wanted to do the research, if you wanted to research the films of Steven Spielberg, of Stanley Kubrick, of Alfred Hitchcock, because I would argue that Castlevania as a franchise is somewhat on the level of, like, that's comparative to that level of director, right? Yeah, I'd say so, yeah.
If you wanted to do the research and write a book or present the whatever, just for fucking research purposes, the life and career of Stanley Kubrick, you can go watch all of Kubrick's movies, and you should. If you haven't, just as an aside, while we're talking about all this, if you haven't watched his movies, real fucking good. You definitely should. And it's easy, right? You can just go access that. That is a thing that is easily accessible. But now, if you want to do the retrospective of Castlevania, you have to steal in order to do so.
Here's one.
Here's
a
that's
fun one.
Weird.
Let's say you wanted to, I don't know, make a YouTube series about the history of The Legend of Zelda.
Somebody might want to do that someday.
Let's say you wanted to do a historical account of every Zelda game released in North America.
Right.
And
every single one.
Every single one.
Biggest to the small.
Unless you're a crazy person like I am and you own the CDI releases.
Right.
Those are not good games, but they have important historical context. And there's no legal way to play those games outside of piracy. There's no legal way to play them unless you have a functioning CDI like I do, and those games, which that's not something that most people have access to.
Right, and if we're being honest, the CDI barely functioned when it was brand new.
Exactly. So
that thing's a piece of shit.
So that is legitimate history from the Legend of Zelda series that is just not accessible, and Nintendo will never make it accessible.
Of course they won't,
because it's
that I think is where I start to have the biggest problem of, like,
it's like the Star Wars George Lucas thing.
Yeah,
that is a piece of history that Nintendo does not want out into the world.
and you don't get to make that decision. Like, and that I feel very strongly about.
Yeah.
Even if you do own it, like, because we're thinking, and I think this is where I think video games still a lot of times get viewed as like, yeah, but they're for kids, and we don't care about kid shit. Like, we would never do that with movies. Movies are sophisticated, you know, and like George Lucas is a fucking asshole. Like, fuck George Lucas. But, you know, like, I think that maybe is where that comes from, because once you create art and put it out into the world, it's not that particular piece of art. You don't own it in the global sense anymore. You own it in the copyright sense and all of those things, obviously. But that's not yours anymore. And I don't think that you get to deny people the access to that, you know, good, bad, and ugly.
Right, because it's like when talking about the whole Disney, like Mickey Mouse thing. Like, I don't think Mickey Mouse should go into public domain, because they're still actively using that character, no more than I think Nintendo should ever have to deal with losing Link or The Legend of Zelda as a franchise into public domain, as long as they're still using it.
Right.
That said, the only interest they have in the Faces of Evil and Wand of Gamelon not being out in the world is, you know, brand delusion, right?
Right.
But they don't have to sell it. They should be able to. Libraries should be able to preserve it.
Legally archived.
Exactly. It should be legally archived and accessible to anybody. Like, they don't have to advertise it, and there could be as many addendums and warnings in front of them as necessary, being like,
sure,
we didn't make this.
This is a gigantic pile of shit.
Yeah, this is not what we want. You know, if you're looking at this, you're looking at it for research purposes only. Like, you can put any and all of those things in front of this stuff that you want to. That's fine by me, in order to not have it damage your brand that there's some super shitty game out there. But, like,
but it should still fucking be accessible in a legal way
for anyone who wants to do the research and for any sort of educational purpose. Like, even if just it's your own personal education. Like,
right.
I want to know what every version of Donkey Kong was like. I think Donkey Kong's fascinating, and I can play the arcade version, I can play the NES version,
the Coleco version.
I can't play the Atari 2600 version. I can't play the Coleco version. I can't play the Intellivision version without original hardware.
Yeah.
Pac-Man for Atari 20 fucking Pac-Man for Atari 2600 is one of the most important games in video game history. Same with E.T. Those are extraordinarily important games. Not for, like, the best of reasons in the world, right? They're largely get pointed to as, like, these are the catalysts for the entire crash of the video game industry in North America, right?
Right.
What are these games? They're nowhere. They're nowhere to be found. The E.T. license? Are you kidding me? Like, who's going to pay for that? Because Amblin Entertainment, they want that money. Pac-Man, that one really mystifies me. Like, why won't they ever include the 2600 version of Pac-Man? It's freaking famous, and it's not as bad as everyone said it is.
Right.
But, like, the multiple other versions of Pac-Man. There was somebody's version of Pac-Man. Some version of Pac-Man was somebody's version of Pac-Man. That's the first one that they played. It was that way for somebody. That does matter. There's historical merit to every port of every major game, even the weirdo ones. Like, there's historical merit to all this stuff. And, like, we're just talking retro games. When we get to the newer stuff, that's when it starts getting really scary. Like, yes.
The stuff that has only ever existed digitally.
The vast majority of what was on the original iPhone App Store was complete, utter garbage. But it happened.
Yeah.
And now none of it's accessible.
None of it. And, like, I saw another figure where in, like, 2020 or 2021 or whatever was, like, the last updated figure I saw. And I'm sure I could get more updated information. I just don't care to. it was something like 91% of video game sales were done through a digital storefront. That doesn't mean 91% of games were digital downloads, but 91% of games were done through a digital something. You have to imagine a large chunk of those were done as digital downloads, right? This is including purchasing a physical disc from Amazon counts as going through digital storefront and whatever. But you would have to imagine, and the numbers certainly bear it out, that over the last few years, I mean, hell, the PlayStation and the current Xbox, there are digital-only versions of those consoles.
Yeah.
And that is, I thought that was what I wanted at the beginning, and I definitely don't now. Like, I have definitely come back around to Team Physical for these things just because of that, the fact that it can just go away.
It can just disappear. That's the part that gets super scary. Like, so we have The Messenger, perfect example. The Messenger is a wonderful, wonderful game, and I love it with all my heart. I didn't know that before I bought it, but when I bought it, it was only available physically. So I was only available digitally, right? So I buy the game, I fall in love with it, I want to get a physical copy, but now I can't because it's no longer in print.
Right.
And getting a physical copy of it is a couple $100s.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry, the game's just not worth a couple $100. There are no games that are worth a couple $100 to me.
Right.
And
Inscription's real good. Hollow Knight, maybe.
But that's a problem because at some point that eShop is going to close. And the problem with the Switch is that it's always going to check to see if I'm allowed to play the games that I have downloaded on my system. And once they stop supporting
am I allowed to play the thing I bought?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, Mom. Are you looking at my report card?
Right? It's always going to check to make sure I am who I say I am, and it's on the system that purchased it's always going to check to make sure that everything's on the up and up. So when they stop doing that and the game can't check to see if I own the thing, then all of a sudden I can't play it anymore. That system's a brick to me now.
Right.
Because unless I'm plugging a physical cartridge into that Switch, there's no way for it to check online 15, 20 years from now. Now, chances are anything that I want is going to be available in some way, shape, or form. But, like, let's look at Save Me, Mr. Taco, right? The original version of that game only exists digitally and will only ever exist digitally because it got retooled for its eventual re-release and physical release. But that original flavor of Save Me, Mr. Taco, if that game's ever getting ported to another platform, that original version's never getting ported because it's owned by a different company and all that other nonsense. Like, that's just not going to happen. So that original flavor of that game is locked to my Switch forever. PT. What's going to happen to PT?
It's gone.
It's gone. People will pay money for PlayStation PS4s or whatever that have that demo downloaded because once that was gone, it was gone.
And what was wild about that too was that I had the PT demo and I played it and that's so fucking cool. And then it was a demo and I deleted it. And then it was removed from the shop. And even though it shows up in my history, I still can't get it. So even though I did, quote unquote, purchase that demo, if it wasn't saved to my system, I was not after a certain point. And I know there was a certain point that you still could download it to. But once that cutoff point happened, even though I had technically purchased this thing, I was not allowed to have it. And that's
madness.
Wild.
It is.
That's crazy. And I think and we've gone on for a while, and I know you got to get to bed here soon.
Yeah.
But I do think this is where I start to champion emulation.
I love what they're going for with the Video Game History Foundation. I get it. piracy's a thing, but you know what? Like, it was, a couple of months ago that the Internet Archive almost got shut down?
Yeah. Which is...
That can happen, you know?
Yeah.
That can absolutely happen. It probably won't, but it very possibly could. That's why piracy and, like, having a bunch of ROMs on your hard drive, yeah, that stuff's never gonna, like, properly go away, per se, but it can become so much harder it already is hard for a lot of people to understand and wrap their heads around. Like,
right.
And I've seen a lot of people just arrogant fucks being like, well, I'm sorry, if you can't do the research to figure out how to emulate the games, then you don't deserve to play them. No, fuck that mentality all the way to hell. That is so insulting that, like, not everybody thinks the way you do. And we were getting right back to the whole, like, the thing we were talking about in the very beginning of the show about the cables and everything. Not everybody thinks the way these people do.
Right.
The fact that trying to figure out how to get an emulator running on your computer is the simplest thing in the world to most people, but there are a lot of people that just don't have they just don't connect dots that way. I'm one of those people. It goes against everything in my brain to be able to trying to figure out, okay, well, where do I go to download the right files? How do I know I'm getting the right files, and how do I add them to the right folders, and then where do I put those things to make them run on my flash cart properly? Like, yes, it can be taught. Yes, you can learn that stuff, and yes, you can look at YouTube videos to do that, but that is not the same as going to a library, checking something out, and going through official means to just have this be something that you can do. It's not the same, and it's never gonna be the same. And the fact that there are so many of those elitist asshats that are just like, just emulate it, just steal it. I did it, anyone can do it, just steal it. Well, maybe I don't want to fucking steal shit, right? Maybe I would
prefer not to.
I would prefer to give credit where credit's due, right? Except on the Flash movie. I'm fine with stealing that.
Because fuck that guy. But yeah, it's like I said with Inscription, like, I wanted to go buy that. I did. And I can't. That's fucked up. That's weird.
It is fucked
weird
up.
That
and
it
is
can't.
weird. And I hate the disposable nature of... I love the convenience of digital games. I absolutely do. And I don't feel like I need to have the ability to resell my digital goods. But I also
that's
don't
just
love
not
the
what it's about. Yeah.
I don't love the idea of if something if they decide to turn something off, then this no longer works, which is different from, like, all right, I bought Wii Virtual Console games.
Right.
I will be able to play those forever until the system dies.
Right.
And once the system dies, there's nothing I can do about that, but that's a risk I understood when I went in. I'm buying this, it's tied to this system. If this system breaks beyond repair, then I'm sorry, these games are just more or less toast. Okay, these things happen. It's similar to, like, if I bought a book, then that book goes out of print, and then that book burns in a fire, I can't get that book anymore. It's tragic, it's unfortunate, but it's kind of a nature of the beast. But where I start to get pissed off is, like, on the Switch, everything that I have digitally, if they decide to turn that shit off, then I don't have it anymore. And that I don't think is okay.
Yeah.
Because there's a pretty big difference between, I didn't take care of this thing and now it's toast. Well, that's very unfortunate, but that's on me. I took care of this thing, but you decided to turn it off. That's not on me, that's on you. That's you taking access away from me because the system you put in place to make sure nobody stole something from you is hurting the people who did buy something from you. Now, granted, how many people are really going to want to play every random game 20, 30 years down the road? But,
well, sure.
It's history.
But that's not the point.
That's not the point. It should be archived.
Who wants to read every fucking book that's ever been? Like that.
Exactly.
And that's not, and that's never been the point. Because You're right. And 30 fucking years from now, is someone going to be like, you know, I'm trying to do a complete fucking retrospective of the Cooking Mama series, and it's just not possible. Like, doubtful. But not impossible that is something that somebody is going to want to do in the future. And I don't know. I come at it from a very from a standpoint of, you know, we've put ourselves in a position where, as a society, we don't value art as much as we should.
Or artists.
Or artists, for sure.
Thank you,
but
AI.
We don't value these things in the way that we should. We value, you know, we've had, and this seems like a weird tangent, I think, but Tiff and I were talking about it the other day of, you know, the fact that she works in a job, right, as a vet tech that does not have a nationwide union, because we value corporations and profit. And I'm not saying where she works is the type of place that values corporations and profit over people and over creativity and art. But there are a lot of vet hospitals that are owned by big conglomerates that are buying up little mom and pops and doing all this stuff, and they would fire people if they tried to be in a union. Because what's more important is the company and the profit, and not the person in their pursuit of a fulfilling life, right? So somehow we've managed to convince ourselves that what's important is how many hours I put in at a job versus the art that I create or enjoy. And because of that, we find ourselves now having to, like, fight for things of, like, but I should be able to just have this. You know, there should be access to this thing that you're trying to take away just because you said you could. And that's fucked up.
I might be able to make a profit on this someday, and I would theoretically be able to make less profit if it was readily available elsewhere. Right.
Again, putting the corporation over the art, over the people who made it. Right? Because when we're talking about, you know, Atari will not, you know, or Midway will not allow the Atari 2600 Pac-Man being released, they're not asking the guy who programmed it. They're not asking the people that created Pac-Man or the estate of the people who created Pac-Man. I don't know if that person's still alive. You know, Midway as a company is making that decision.
Namco.
And that's, or sorry, why do I keep saying I'm tired?
Well, because Midway, I believe Midway was involved in it at some point, but yeah, it's Namco, John.
But Namco, yeah. You're right, 100%. That was fucking stupid.
Hundo P.
The points, the Hundo P. They say that in The Flash. He says Hundo P. It's going to be your favorite part of the movie.
10 out of 10.
Anyway, I'm sorry, right? 10 out of 10. Would watch again.
Forgiven.
It's just like, yeah, like the point still stands, you know, that like you're not asking the creator, you know, Adventure, the original Adventure, is not the most easily accessible thing. It's not a Warren Robinette decision.
Yeah, it is. It's on the Atari 50.
Well, sure, but you see
I see your point, yes.
Whether it was or was not on Atari 50, they didn't fucking ask Warren. They weren't like, hey, dude, what do you think?
Superman for Atari 2600. Now, there's one that's never been re-released as well. It's fucking Superman.
It's Superman. Spider-Man. Has that Spider-Man game been re-released?
Don't think so.
Again, I don't know why you would want to play it, but if you were doing a retrospective of comic book video games, that should be on there. Accessible. Anyway, so pro piracy, I think, is where we've ended up. Yeah, it's fucking wild. That number really, really staggered me. 87% of retro
wild.
Games just are not readily available. And that is, and I wonder what the number is for movies. I would have to imagine it is measures less than 87% movie.
Oh, it's got to be. I mean, we just had to track. We all had to pirate Zapped for the most recent episode of Theater Near You because it's not currently available on any streaming services. But if we really needed to, we could have tried to track down an existing DVD of it. But yeah,
right.
There are occasionally run into movies that we need to watch for a podcast that they're just not accessible. But it's few and far between. It's usually because it's some random ass stuff that nobody should watch.
Yeah,
like Zapped.
Like spoilers. Jeez, Chris. Give people a reason to tune in.
No, this isn't a spoiler. This is a content warning. This is a trigger trigger warning. If you don't like rampant sexual assault in your movies, then perhaps you should be ready for some shit.
I don't like rampant sexual assault not in my movies. That's one of the things that takes it down a peg for me.
Yeah. Zapped,
whether it's in there,
not okay.
I hope it has to be in there or committed by one of the actors. That's kind of my that's terrible. It's not a thing to joke about. This is what happens when it gets past midnight.
Ah, fuck, it is.
Stone Age Gamer After Dark. All right, put a pin in it.
Video game preservation
everything.
is super interesting. I'm glad we had this conversation, but it's time to wrap it up. We could talk around in circles about this all night. That is our show. Join us next week for the July 10, 20, 30, 40, where we talk about video games released 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago, most of which you probably can't buy.
See, it's all coming full circle. There's a bunch of shit you can't have.
Yeah. We're on most social media platforms, and if you want to get in touch with us, we aren't very difficult to find. All it takes is a quick look at our show notes, and you'll see links to our social media accounts, as well as all manner of other fun stuff, like a link to our namesake, StoneAgeGamer.com, and more useful links than you can shake a joystick at. If you'd like to get early access to this show's episodes, as well as a bevy of other shows on the Geekade Podcast Network, check out our Patreon, also linked to in the show notes. It helps keep this show running week after week, and all our patrons are loved and appreciated. This show's theme song, Squared Roots, was written by Banjo Guy Ollie. You can learn all about his wonderful music and more by following the link to his YouTube channel, also in the show notes. And finally, as always, we'd like to thank our intrepid editor, Evan, for making the show listenable for all you folks. We'd like to thank all you folks for listening in the first place. That is it. We are, I guess by the time this episode comes out, it'll be regular common knowledge, but we are doing a live show. I'm doing a live show.
I mean, it's going to be live. I'll be there live.
You'll be there, technically. You'll be where you are live, but
that's
yes,
right.
We're doing a live podcast recording out at the Stone Age Gamer store in Salem, Ohio. They're flying me out there to do a bunch of stuff for their 16th anniversary. We're gonna have a big party.
Flying
and
Kris out there. I didn't even get invited.
Fuck off, you got it.
Ryan was fuck you. I'm not bringing that asshole out here. That was the vibe I was picking up. Was that not it? Oh.
Well, it's just me this time. Maybe sometime in the future we'll get us both out there to do something. But yes, we're gonna do a whole thing. We're selling tickets to the event, and it should be a lot of fun. We're gonna record a trivia episode where I'm gonna somehow pit the audience against Dan, which is gonna be fun. So right. I guess it's for the best that he's not there, which means I can't do like a real cage match.
I would fight you fuckers in person.
So yeah, I don't know if any tickets are going to be properly available, or I don't even know if anyone's going to show up to see us record. But who knows? But
of course,
regardless, they are. Yeah, that's the thing. All right, it's late. I want to go to bed. I love you all. Thanks for listening. On behalf of Dan and myself, keep playing games illegally.